There was a war in the 18th century that people casually call the War of the Hats. Not a metaphor, not a joke. A war, named after hats. Sweden and Russia fought. Finland burned. A crown prince got traded like a promissory note. And the worst part is that the hat was not even the strangest thing involved. Here is what most people think they heard. Some nobleman insulted someone by tipping a hat. Someone panicked. Cannons happened. That story is neat. That story is wrong. The hat in question was a political nickname. In Stockholm, during Sweden's Age of Liberty, the Riksdag ran the show more than the king did. Factions formed. One group was called the Hats, after the tricorn style associated with officers and gentlemen. Their rivals were the Caps, a nickname thrown like a polite insult. And the Hats had a fixation. Sweden had lost land to Russia in 1721. Finland sat on the frontier like a locked door with a broken hinge. The Hats wanted the hinge back, preferably by force. It is amazing what people will rationalize when pride wears a uniform. The Hats' rise was not just ideology. It was money. War needs cash, and politics loves borrowing from tomorrow. By 1738 and 1739, the Hats took power in the Riksdag and pushed an expansionary policy that ran through the central bank and paper notes. Inflation is not a cannon, but it can still be loud. They also leaned hard toward France. Subsidies mattered. In the language of the time, if you want to look like a great power again, it helps if another great power pays for the costume. But the Hats still needed a spark that would sell. They got one on a road in Silesia. On the 17th of June, 1739, a Swedish officer and envoy named Malcolm Sinclair was intercepted while traveling home. 2 Russian officers took his diplomatic papers. Sinclair was killed. Word traveled faster than armies do. In Sweden, the outrage did not stay elite. A popular revenge ballad spread in long, relentless verses. The message was simple. Sweden should pay Russia back. Now, here is where the archive gets honest and irritating. Sources disagree on whether the murder was a rogue operation or a sanction hit. Sources agree that Sweden treated it as proof that Russia would never respect Swedish neutrality. The Hats used the Sinclair affair as a moral lever. It made war sound like justice. It also made war sound inevitable. Those are 2 very different sounds. By 1740, the Hats pushed war planning through the Riksdag. The timing looked favorable on paper. Russia had internal strain and foreign distractions. Sweden imagined a quick strike in Finland, a decisive move toward Vibeke, and then negotiations from strength. On the 20th of July, 1741, Sweden formally declared war. The problem was that Sweden's plans assumed competence as a baseline. That was optimistic. The Swedish army in Finland struggled with coordination. The fleet hesitated. Commanders argued. Supplies dragged. Meanwhile, Russia did what empires do when they smell indecision. Russia moved first. This is where the story earns its ridiculous title. The war people call the War of the Hats is not named after a hat incident. It is named after the Hats faction that started it. Myth versus reality correction number 1. No one went to war because someone wore headwear incorrectly. They went to war because a party did, in fact, wear its pride like a uniform. In August 1741, Russia advanced toward Wilmenstrand, present-day Lappeenranta. The numbers were ugly. Around 10,000 Russian troops hit a Swedish force closer to 4,000. The fighting was brief and brutal. Swedish losses included large numbers killed, wounded, and captured. The commander Karl Henrik Wrangel was taken. Sources disagree on the exact casualty totals at Wilmenstrand. Sources agree that it was a shattering defeat and that Stockholm immediately began looking for someone to blame. The Hats had wanted a triumphant opening chapter. Instead, they got a public disaster, written in smoke, and filed under humiliation. Now the missing context that makes the Hat name feel like a prank. This war is also a story about governance. During the Age of Liberty, the Swedish state was run through committees and parliamentary bargaining. That system could be brilliant at restraint. It could also be brilliant at spreading responsibility so thin that no one felt the heat until the fire arrived. Economic context mattered too. War financing through credit and notes did not just pay soldiers. It shaped how fast Sweden could react when the first battle went wrong. And then there was Finland itself. Finland was not a distant colony. Finland was the frontier of the kingdom. Towns like Helsingfors, Turku, and Hamina were not abstract names. They were supply hubs, garrisons, and winter shelters. When Russia advanced, Finland took the impact in real time. In 1742, Russia occupied Finland in what Finns later called the Lesser Rus. The name is almost polite, which tells you something about how bad the greater ones were. Then came one of the strangest documents of the war. Empress Elizabeth of Russia issued a message to the people of Finland. The message promised protection if Finns stopped supporting Swedish resistance. It even floated the idea of Finland as a free country under Russian protection. Sources disagree on whether this was a genuine plan for a buffer state or a psychological operation to break Swedish control. Sources agree that it was distributed broadly and that it pressured Swedish authority at the exact moment Sweden could least afford pressure. Myth versus reality correction number 2. The war did not collapse because Swedish soldiers were cowards. The war collapsed because leadership failed to coordinate, and because Russia used both troops and politics as weapons. By 1743, Sweden needed Finland back. Russia knew it. Negotiations hardened around land and succession. Russia demanded a strip of southern Finland, including key fortress territory east of the Kymi River, and cities like Vilmanstrand and Fredrikshamn. Borders in this region are not lines. Borders are choke points, roads, and the distance to St. Petersburg. Then came the trade that makes people blink. Sweden agreed to designate Adolf Fredrik of Holstein-Gottorp as Crown Prince. Russian troops would not fully leave Finland until that selection was secured. Myth versus reality correction number 3. This was not a romantic duel between nations. This was leverage. Finland was the collateral, and a crown prince was part of the payment schedule. When the treaty was signed in August 1743, the opening claim became painfully true. A war named after a hat faction ended with Sweden smaller, Finland bruised, and Swedish politics temporarily under Russian influence. So yes, a hat started a war. Not because fabric offended anyone, but because a faction named after a hat decided that prestige was worth blood. The timeline holds. Pride rises. Plans fail. Finland absorbs the damage. Diplomacy collects the bill. If you want the quiet irony, here it is. The Age of Liberty was supposed to protect Sweden from reckless monarchs. It did not fully protect Sweden from reckless majorities. Humans are adaptable like that. And somewhere in Stockholm, a tricorn still hangs in the imagination, perfectly innocent, while the paperwork beneath it explains how easily a name can become a legacy. If a hat can start a war, imagine what your opinions can do. Subscribe carefully.